postman brought this little box from QRP Labs to my door this morning, so I can't wait to find out what Hans has sent me this time. Well, it is the brand new, one of the first QMX Plus transceivers. And he told me he would send it to me so I could assemble it. I have done a couple of QMXs before, so I'm very, very curious to see how this one will be building and also performing. So we got all kinds of parts as usual, and then what's this? This is the QLG3 GPS. That's the, I believe, the internal GPS that QRP Labs has, and a bunch of other things and parts, and this appears to be the housing, of course. Okay, further unwrapping showed me that there's a little bag here which seems to be the SMPS boards that I already know from the QMX, and this is the main board. Really nice quality again, as we already know from QRP Labs. And here is some more stuff. This seems to be maybe the front LCD board, I think, and a real pile of parts, capacitors, the toroids, the wires, everything you need to build the new QMX Plus. So I thought it would be a good idea to sort out the parts first, and I took a little box and I threw all the toroids and the wires in, and another box that contains the capacitors, and I'm gonna check all of them and mark them. This is, I think, a good idea in order to speed things up when it gets to assembly. Here I am, all the capacitors are marked. There are some singular ones that are not on a board, but I will worry about those later. But I think it will save time in the long run if I mark them all by their value before I start building the unit. Time to take a closer look at the PCB. Everything looks very nice, and I'll start having the fun of building the QMX Plus. I have found it helpful to first install the capacitors through the board, then use a little piece of foam to hold it down in this manner, turn it around, and then make your soldering connections. This board has a very, very high heat capacity when it comes to these points right here. You see that? That's the ground connection. So make sure you take enough time to heat up the pad and you have a soldering iron that is capable of doing the job. Otherwise, the soldering connection will be bad in this position. This is how the board looks with all the capacitors installed. Nice! The next step is installing the 12 diodes, 1N4007, which is a very easy job. The only task is to observe polarity. The next step is an easy one again. It's about to install all the inductors, 8 of them, on the PCB. So let's go for it. And here we are. All of the 8 47 microhenry inductors are in place. Next, we're about to install the 4 final transistors BS170, and they must be oriented with their flat sides towards the PCB, and a little washer will press them down later on. So here we are. Final transistors are installed, facing flat to the surface of the board, and there's a little screw that holds everything down. There is actually not a lot of space between this part and the screw head, but it fits. I like to use a knife to scratch off the enamel of the wire. This has worked for me very well in the past. After scraping off the enamel, the ends of the wires look sort of shiny and the transformer wires are ready to tin. Tinning the ends of the wires just makes it easier to check on the continuity of the wires as described in the manual. It may not really be necessary, but I have the habit of marking wire ends like these with a permanent marker so nothing can go wrong. Again, I use my knife to remove the enamel, but I do not tin the wires before putting them through their holes in the PCB. Here is where it should go into the board. L502 is very easy to wind 10 windings on the FT3743 toroid and you're all set. I used again my knife on the ends of the wires until they are nice and shiny. I do not tin them and then I put them in their holes in the PCB and solder the toroid in its place. Once again, use enough heat to do that and check your soldering connections after you have soldered the toroid. The next thing to do is to wind L403 exactly as described in the manual, and here it is already with the tinned wires. I did not use the knife on this one. It burns off very well, just with the soldering iron at a good temperature. I have completed now the installation of the bandpass toroids, which are L401, 403, 404, and 405. I made a little mistake on 404, as you can see. Here the blue side is facing down. It should face up, but I wasn't really paying attention to that, so that's something I'll have to live with since I didn't want to rewind it. And L405 consists of two toroids, as you can see here. It's a little tricky to install them, but not really complicated. And well, here we are with the bandpass filters. Meanwhile, I have installed the low-pass filters, toroids, for 160 meters and also for the combined 80 meter and 40 meter. And the others are soon to follow. These are the next toroids for the low-pass filters, and I have marked them so I cannot mix them up, and I'll install them in the next step. To burn off the enamel of the wire, I like to turn on my little fan to get rid of the smoke that's coming up from the wires, and I have a little holder where I can fix my toroids before I tin them. That's the way I actually tin them. So that's fairly easy when you use this method. And here they are again, all nicely tinned and ready for installation. All low-pass filters have been installed now, all the toroids for the low-pass filters I should say. And that's the way it looks right now. And we're going to the next step. I have already completed transformer T401, and I have checked the continuity of the wires and marked them, so it's ready to be installed into the board. Okay, all toroids are installed now. This is the latest one, and everything looks really good so far. The next task is the winding of transformer T507, which just needs 10 turns on each side of this binocular core, as you can see here. And after that, you have to put one wire through the middle, like right here. And I found to make that nice and fitting well, it should look like this U-shaped thing later on. Well, is it focusing? It is. And I found it very simple doing this. I used the DC jack as a gauge, and I just bent the wire this way, so I will get a little U-shaped thing like this here, which fits exactly through the holes on the PCB right here later on. Transformer 507 is ready for installation. Please note that the thinner wires already have been tinned, whereas the bigger 0.6 millimeter U-shaped wires, I only scratched off the enamel, but I did not tin them. If you tin them, they won't fit through the hole, so this needs to be done later on. Now I'm gonna install it. Good! T507 is installed. It is, well, not complicated, but you need a little bit of feeling and maybe some good tweezers like these here to get the wires through the according holes. But no big deal, it can be done, and it sure looks like a radio by now, doesn't it? As you can see, in the next step I have already installed the rear panel connectors, and it is very important that these are aligned properly. In other words, these 3.5 millimeter jacks have a tendency not to sit straight in their on the board, but have a little angle. Now I just used a plier and I turned them a little bit straight. I soldered one point, then I turned them straight, and then I soldered the other points. Maybe that's a good idea to do it the same way. If you plan to use the optional enclosure that I have here, it is also important not to use too much solder right here on the DC jack on the outside. And this is true for the upside of the board and also for downside, because later on you will slide the PCB in these little rails here, and if there's excessive soldering, it won't fit. And that happened to me. It's no big deal, you just have to remove it, but it can be avoided if you think of it in advance. And if everything is installed properly, it really fits very well, just like it should. In the next step, the front panel connectors are installed. Flat on the surface, no angle, should be easy to do. Next, we will install the SMPS power supply boards, and the first step on them will be to file off any of the remaining tabs that are around the edges or the rims until they're really smooth and clean. Step number 2 is to insert the 10 millimeter nylon screws and also put the distance washers on top. Okay, I have prepared the installation of the boards. They are not soldered yet. First of all, make sure that your connectors are over the surface, not touching the surface of the PCB, just as described in the manual. And in the section before, I had used the wrong hole for that M3 10mm screw. It goes in here. So I needed to correct that. And everything looks good to me, so we're good for a go when it comes to solder. So the SMPS boards are installed, soldered, and I think everything looks okay. Next is this little board which carries the pedal and the audio connectors. Not much to it. Pay attention to align everything nicely, and it's no big deal at all, I think. This is how the installed connector board looks like. It is connected through these little wires that you should have kept from your capacitors, and soldered at I think 10 joints. 1, 2, 4, 6, 10 joints, that's right. And well, looks good to me so far. Okay, we're already on the next board, which is the front panel board. And step 1 is to install this contrast trimmer for the LCD display. And the manual says install it and set it fully counterclockwise. Now connecting these 3 female pin headers is really easy. Just keep in mind they need to be aligned, because later on they will be connected to these headers that you have already installed on the main board. And so it's no big deal. Nice clean soldering connections, and you should be good to go. The next job is to install the SMD battery holder for the CR2032, which is really easy. Just a little soldering on the tabs and solder it together. It's a no-brainer. The only thing you need to take care of is the orientation, that this cutoff edge should be to the lower left corner. Now the microphone is installed, and nothing can go wrong here. If you align the microphone with the circle, you bend the wires a little bit so they will fit the holes on the board, and also the installation of the push button switches here is really easy. They are soldered from the back side. Pay attention as not to hit the plastic of the of the pin headers, otherwise it'll melt and look ugly, but no problem, I think. Right on. In this step, the LCD module is connected to the front panel, and if you do it exactly as described in the manual, you should not have a problem, and you get a first impression of your new radio. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, I have done a couple of steps in the meantime, as it seemed to be just too much hassle to turn on the video cam every time I did a little step. Now here's what we did. We installed the LCD board like we said before, and then the front panel board was installed. There are 3 little nuts that are easy to install, and this one on the edge is a little bit difficult. And in order to get a little more room, because I didn't feel too comfortable with it, I just cut off a little bit of this edge in order to make that nut turn a little bit easier, and it worked. And then I soldered these little pads from the rotary encounter that I had bent in the wrong direction earlier, I must admit, but now that everything got together, it is perfectly clear how it should be done. Now, the only thing I didn't feel too comfortable about, I must admit, was to do this soldering here. Like it's a little bit, you're working in the dark without vision. I hope that I made no shorts, because you actually have to solder it from this position. And it's easier on the back side, of course, but on the front side it has to be soldered while everything is mounted, which is a bit tricky. But if you have uh, a calm hand and a good soldering iron, it can be done. And yes, sir, here we are. The front panel assembly is complete, and it's really pretty, I must say. So on to the next step of hopefully finally assembling this beautiful radio. Oh boy, this is so beautiful. I must say, it really fits like a glove. I just installed the front panel assembly together with the main board, and no problems whatsoever. The jacks here were aligned with the front panel, and I'm really happy. Show you all the sides. And I must say, Hans has done another masterpiece of mechanical engineering on this one too, because everything fits together very, very well. And I'm really, really proud to have built this radio. Before I complete the assembly of the radio, I think it's worth to take a look at the QLG3 internal GPS, which is in this little bag here. And I'm gonna see if I can complete this unit as well and install it in the new QMX Plus. Okay, regarding the QLG3 GPS board, I cannot say more than I just installed it. I did not find the manual because the product is brand new and it has not even been released. Hans will release everything this weekend at Dayton, but I was the lucky guy to get hold of all the parts and the kit beforehand so I could assemble it. And this is the internal GPS. That's the way it looks, and fairly easy to install. Some pin header soldered to the bottom and the antenna jack to this PCB here. Fairly easy, but really great job development wise. Well, the deed is done. It looks like everything worked perfectly, fit perfectly, and was really great fun to build. Now I need to download the firmware and take everything into operation and hope, I really do hope, that I made no mistakes and my QMX Plus transceiver works.